going to let everyone just introduce themselves first. Edmund, do you want to start?
Sure. My name is Edmund Zagrin, founder and CEO of BitOps. We do AI for procurement negotiations, and that's it.
How you doing? Chris Maycumber, I'm the CEO of Who Knows. We're a machine learning platform that basically derives profiles, what people know, who they know. So think of us as building LinkedIn on crack. And we do this for internal networks for enterprise companies. We also have 370 million profiles that we're going directly after LinkedIn this year as well.
We are not LinkedIn for crack.
On crack, not for crack.
Okay, yeah. That sounds interesting.
It's a different market.
Oh, I will do the microphone, though I feel like I can project to this crowd. So my name is Sam Hayes. I'm the founder and president of Tango Trade. We provide a letter of credit alternative. So I kind of probably represent the fintech side of this equation, which has its own different, I think, challenges for adoption.
Awesome, thank you. So we're spending the day talking about corporate innovation and what works and what doesn't work, and we just left kind of a round table. And I'd love to throw this out to all three of you. What do you see as being some of the biggest challenges when starting a new potential relationship with a corporate client?
I can go first. And hopefully this doesn't sound like too much of a rant because we love enterprise customers. But most of them still have no clue how to bring innovation inside their company, especially working with a startup. I can't tell you how many times, and these guys probably have war stories too, we find the awesome champion, we find the little innovation budget that some finance person has given to this group and says, here's $1 million to go innovate. We nail the pilot, we nail the use case, and then there's like keep the lights on budget items that basically crowd out any type of scale. And it's amazingly, it's not only frustrating for us, but it's frustrating for the internal employees who are assigned to innovate, and then they reach this wall where they actually can have impact and they can't go further. So happy to rant more about that, but that's my general topic.
Maybe I'll take next side, maybe other sides of the spectrum. So a little bit different on my side. So I actually used to run corporate development and business development for the Java platform, which is the largest developer platform for Sun Microsystems. And so I've been on the other side of the equation. Then I've also started a company that's been acquired by a major company, NASDAQ, and then been part of the host company who is kind of have that responsibility. So I've done a lot of merger integration side. And we're partnering now. We're a very small company, kind of just at the seed stage, but we're partnering with a large cross-border payment provider who does $2 billion worth of payments, and payments have a lot of trust and licenses and other things that go around with it. So my response is really around that matching function that people have and building trust. And we used to have, at Sun, we had a person that worked at the State Department. We used to kind of joke about the confidence building measures. And so I think that's kind of where I come from, of a lot of communication, a lot of expectation setting, and it's really a relationship that you have to build.
Edmund, do you want to follow up?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that working with enterprises is really a project management process in and of itself, and you really need to invest in that process as well as the technology and the outcomes. I think where I see startups get it wrong is they come in and say, oh, well, we have this amazing technology and we have this amazing value prop. Of course, this is going to work. And the reality is that there's a lot of communication, and there's also just kind of a lot of empathy that needs to happen, especially if you're working with stakeholders that may be under a bunch of different pressure from different projects that exist for them in other departments, if there's budgetary pressures. And then I think kind of the final thing where I see there being a little bit of a mismatch sometimes is that, you know, it's like seeing like a fruit fly and an elephant. Like a fruit fly will die and get reborn like 1,000 times in a minute. It's an exaggeration, but an elephant, you know, lives a very long time. And, you know, just when you think on timescales that are, like one thing that enterprise folks say to me sometimes when we first meet is they tell me how long their company's been around. And that's actually a very common social convention for people who work at big companies to do. Oh, we're 120, however many year old company. And if I were to say it back to you, hey, we've been around for like 36 months, and each one of those months has been high growth, high impact experience, that's something we can bring to your organization. But if you tell us come back in 3 years, we're not going to treat that as an ongoing engagement.
All right, so you've all talked about building relationships and taking the time and the effort and the energy. So that's part of my job here at GSV Labs is I also work with our enterprise clients, right? And I get to work with our product team who's working with startups. And there's, when we talk about sales cycles or you talk about how quickly things go, I'm like, yeah, no, I sent a proposal, maybe 6 months, we'll see. And they're like, yeah, I sent a proposal, so maybe Monday. Totally different. But kind of to that point, once you find an internal champion at a company, and maybe you can speak to how you do that, but when you find that internal champion who may not be empowered or fully in that position to, make the decision to bring you in or give you the larger budget once you've, kind of completed out that user case, what can you do to make them more successful or to make the partnership as successful as possible?
You want to go reverse order? It might be, again, all right, guess you jump in. And I might be repeating myself, but it is expectation setting. I like your kind of project management mantra. I think it's really important to understand what their goals are. And I'd also kind of in that stakeholder analysis, there's the buyer, there's the influencer, and really understand it's sometimes very difficult. And I know we've talked about this, which is, because you're running innovation, sometimes that's different from the BU and from the sales. And, so really understanding what they're trying to get to accomplish. Also, they have a network usually within a large company, and they'll have people who either, will be friendly to the effort or will be interested. And I think trying to kind of manage that sponsor's network is really important. But it really does come down to expectations on timing, which you mentioned. But also, I think you might get into this, but what are the reasonable outcomes of this? What do you represent? So I think you had mentioned we bring innovation and we make things happen. Sometimes people refer to that as you're going to break things, and that's not good. So really setting that as the framework around that is important.
I'll just piggyback on that for a sec. I think it's important to remember that whoever brings you into an organization is probably going to, not probably, certainly is going to share in either the success or the failure of the project. And so they are taking a risk. And so anytime there's an opportunity to give your champion credit for something that your technology does, that's something that we spend a lot of time doing. We create a monthly report for every stakeholder and every customer that shows how much money our product saved. We do vendor negotiations, so we measure against a historical baseline of what the product used to cost and what it costs after it runs through our process. And we send that to the C-suite. And we generally, mention the champion by name in that report as being the person who's driven that impact.
Yeah, more of the same. I think what we found, it was a hard lesson early on, which is now completely obvious, is that as soon as you win over that champion, they're part of your team. They're your sales rep inside the company, right? And they're your champion. You need to make them a hero. You need to make them look like the smartest person that brought you in, whatever you can do to prop them up. And let's face it, a lot of these champions have to deal with how much of their own brand they're going to put on the line, how much risk are they going to take. Anything we can do, we've done some clever things in the past where we'll de-risk the sales process. We'll de-risk the value prop as we go out. Rather than wait for a pilot and people to come on, we do a little bit of guerrilla marketing efforts. Why wait for a business unit to approve 500 people? We'll go get 500 employees to sign up, and we'll go get net promoter scores from those people. We give that to the champion who basically says, we don't need a pilot because we've already had 500 people using this. So how can you de-risk the whole initiative so they look like a hero?
All right, so hero making, I like it. So I think all of you have mentioned this now. Sometimes the timing is just off, whether that's because one party wants to go fast, or maybe because another party can't because of capacity or budgeting, or other processes, in large corporations that simply just slow things down. Have you ever found anything other than a direct contract or a partnership to be helpful? Has a corporation ever helped you in a different way? And that's something, again, we're kind of talking to a group of corporate innovators here. Is there something else they can do to support that?
I'll take the first shot at that. So one thing that's really interesting, I think, in fintech that companies look to smaller companies for is that it's this reading of a different market that they really don't have the pulse on. So you guys may or may not be familiar, but so-called fintechs have really, with the personal loan industry, I think it went in the last 5 years from like 5% to 40% of all personal loans are through fintechs. Now, Goldman Sachs has Marcus, and so there are some, I don't know exactly how they characterize that, but I think that there's a real sense that, both sides can learn from the market. One of the things that we're working on is a part of the letter of credit that the big banks don't really service when it's kind of less than $1 million, because they really are kind of, their processes are set up for that. So they just don't really know as much about that market, and we can be kind of nimble to understand it. And so there's learning on both sides. And again, this is back to expectation setting. If that's what they want to learn from us, and then we can kind of focus on that and bring data and surveys and things that make them a champion. But I think that has nothing to do with winning a contract or signing or anything else. I think there's learning on both sides.
Yeah, a lot of, obviously you want the deal. We've had people come back after 3 years and say, now we're ready. It's like, great, thanks. Could use that 18 board meetings ago. But what we found, a lot of these innovation champions, they love the startup space. They love the innovation, right? They are the champions of cutting edge technology, but they still get the paycheck of a nice enterprise company, which I'm not jealous of at all. So we found great advisors. These executives, these CHROs, these CIOs that want to dip their toe in, they want to come in. They all know each other. Referrals are brilliant. They have events where they're trying to bring in innovation and they can showcase off, and we call it kind of the startup safari where they're looking at the animals and whatnot, but it's good for us because it's brand building and whatnot. So we'll take anything we can from the relationship and hopefully give something back.
So if folks are excited about our technology and excited about our space, but for whatever reason can't do a deal with us now, there are 3 ways that we engage. One is if someone is a subject matter expert and wants to just contribute knowledge to a community of practitioners, we'll do an interview with them and put it on our blog. It might seem like a small thing, but it's actually a super meaningful part of how we engage with the procurement community. And we're a part of a lot of communities of practice around specific categories within that, particularly raw materials, base metals, industrial supplies, that there just isn't a lot of knowledge. People are retiring, and there's a huge gap in terms of just tribal knowledge being passed down through the profession. And so we consider that to be kind of a thing that we can do for the procurement community that elevates our brand. Second is people can do an introduction. We have like a basic email template where we'll ask people to introduce us to someone that they think would be excited about us. Doesn't have to be a customer, just someone who thinks that our technology is exciting and that they could get value from it. The third way is we've begun doing these procurement digitization workshops. There are a lot of people that are interested in ways that new technology is going to change buying. There's been a lot of emphasis on selling and the way that cloud technology has disrupted sales, but much less so in supply chain. And so we'll actually get together with a group of procurement or supply chain professionals at a company and do like a team building exercise and walk through some of the ways that new technology enable integration. And I think from a value perspective, it's important to remember that Salesforce raised $100 million and they spent like $75 million educating the market about what the cloud was. And so there's a lot of costs associated with developing and bringing a new technology to market that have nothing to do with closing deals.
Thank you all. So this is my last question, then we'll open it up to some of theirs. What advice do you have for corporate innovators to make their work with you most successful? I know that you've probably already said it in a lot of different words in some of your answers, but I'd love that kind of one piece of advice that you could give.
I'll go first. So I found a lot of progress over the last 20 years, I guess 10 years most importantly, in getting in the door. Whether it's the corporate venture guys trying to figure out where to find the right pilot, or just the corporate innovation scouts finding right ways to introduce us to C-level execs. Where I still see kind of an evolution that's necessary is, great, we just had a successful pilot, now what's next? It's, if anyone ever read that Harvard Business Review article about horizons, of business units, Horizon 1, 2, 3, how do you go from Horizon 3, which is just like, does it work, to Horizon 2, which is how do we scale this? And that jump is huge. It's almost the equivalent of like crossing the chasm in a normal marketplace. And I think that type of maturity, maybe it's something GSV Labs can help with. Quick plug.
Thank you.
I'll get my check later. But that's where, we would love to just have that all streamlined going forward.
I can go. Yeah, I would say that one of the real challenges is that innovation role across a large multi-business, company. So at Sun, we spent quite a bit on R&D. We had a chip platform, we had a middleware platform, we had obviously an OS, Solaris. So it's really hard to kind of monitor innovation across all of those kind of businesses, and it's if you're the person, each BU has somebody inside of each one of those. So I would really kind of try to focus in on what do you really want from the innovation side, just being very focused and get those metrics down. That would be the easiest.
Thank you. Edmund?
I'll keep it brief since I know we're about to start something people are excited about. Be the right person. I think sometimes when in large organizations you hear people say, oh, I'm not the right person, but let me see if I can find who is. And I would say, like, anyone could be the right person for that moment in time, either by saying something that you need or that you think is valuable and telling the, startup what they need to hear, or just providing some advice or suggestions. But yeah, having that moment where you're just like, yes, I am talking to you, and let me represent my organization and give you some kind of feedback, super valuable.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I'd love to open it up. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering in terms of educating people in the company. I work for a company that's 120,000 people there, and I have a great network. I've been with the company for more than 10 years, so I know a lot of people there. But it takes a lot of time to introduce companies and to share, and then they don't understand it, and they don't know what the heck to do with it, and be the right person and all that stuff. I was wondering whether any of you have worked with webinars as a tool and what your experiences with that. Did that, apart from having a bunch of people signing up, but did it really lead to a successful outcome in the end?
I can give a quick answer to that. So, yeah, webinars for us that I've seen is very helpful in kind of getting people to kind of understand how a product works. It's less, I've seen less success kind of trying to explain the market space and different competitors. And one thing that I've seen that really works is to get the sales group involved. So that pulls a demand, right? That they're saying that their customers see a demand for this. That tends to kind of pull people in. Now, if you need a webinar to kind of get the salespeople kind of up to speed of exactly how that product works, but my experience with it is they've either seen that gap in the market and they have gone to their management saying, gosh, we need this kind of solution. So I would just be a little bit careful of trying to educate people that don't want to be educated, and be more, again, as I said, kind of tailored to people that perceive that there's a problem. And the the startup either has the technology solution or kind of the market vision to solve that problem for someone.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, so webinars are great. I think they're like one piece of like a 30-piece puzzle that you need to put together to help people like you. And you know, we work so hard, quarters, months, years even, to get down our pitch to like a 30-second, like how do you just resonate with someone? And then it takes even longer to give it to someone like you so you can do a transitive communication to other people, right? So that's, you know, tier one. Then like, okay, they at least understand the general concept. All right, is there a one-pager we can give you that for execs that are interested that you can follow up? And you're basically mimicking our marketing playbook, but we've translated it to your world. Once they get the one-pager, great. They do weekly webinars or signups if you want to learn more. And how do we give you that ladder of communication and collateral that you can help us help you? You know, so that's what we try and put together, is that entire playbook. And frankly, champions aren't always willing to, you know, learn it, and it's tough. But the good news is the playbook can be applied to every startup that you bring in. You can almost give them a checklist of like, okay, I need the blurb that my VP is going to take 15 seconds to read before he dismisses the rest of the email. Then I need the one pager for his lieutenants that are going to spend 5 minutes on it, and then go on. And you just need collateral for every audience.
Let me just add into that, because just hopefully this is tactical for you. So I have seen recently to put together a webinar about $10,000 for kind of a third party who does it a great job. And like that's just a lot of money, I think, certainly for a startup in terms of part of your marketing mix. And as I said, I think it's a point solution. I think the best webinars are pretty specific, walking somebody through how a product works. So that's some of the challenges of cost and focus.
Webinars can be fun, but people have really short attention spans, and webinars sometimes are too long and say too much. I would say if we're going to engage with someone, we like to meet with them in person at the beginning of the engagement. It's tough if it's a globally spread apart team, but we actually just had a customer who was a prospect, reached out and said, hey, our whole procurement team from all over the world, including China, Latin America, is all getting together in one place. Would you travel to this location to do a workshop? And I was like, yes, of course, because how often is this group of people together globally? Once a year. And you know, we actually have thought so much about the kind of in-person experience of making change management and talking about that fun that we created a custom tailored trivia game that's like a bar trivia game. It's all procurement themed questions for procurement leaders to play with their teams. So it's like a team building exercise. It's educational. It's fun. We give prizes to the winners. And at the end, you've learned something about machine learning, AI, and procurement.
Different kind of game night. Does anyone else have another question?
Yeah, I do. So we spend a lot talking the challenges to engage with large organizations, right? In your perspective. I would like to, my question is the other way. Because what I'm hearing from you guys, which is very important, you are looking to those enterprises as my customer acquisition. I want to make this enterprise a customer. That's one part of the puzzle, right? Because you could develop a solution that you need that enterprise to help you go to market, depend how your solution look like. My question to you guys is, how do you measure now in your side the challenge that you have, resources, budget, etc., when you need to engage with enterprise? Are you committed, and for how long are you committed to put the resources to get that deal after 6 months and be able to educate? Because the reality is, you know, I've been in both sides, right? Startups or in a large organization, it's kind of, I love both. I don't see as a two words. I'm coming from this world, you are coming from that world. I think like we are on the same page. We are just now in different jobs or different companies, but could be the opposite. I think I would like to hear also like from you, like what is your, when you give up and say, no, I'm not going to invest more time in this account, or could you explain your challenges as well? Because you have, right? A lot.
I'm happy to give a quick answer there. So our company has 3 core values: thoughtfulness, responsiveness, and Promethean vision. We like people who are fairly responsive, are thoughtful about what they do, and dream big. And we need someone who has all of those at the beginning, who's excited about working with us. If it's a hard sell, or we're solving something that isn't actually a person's problem, it's just not going to work. And so I think when you're, right out of the gate and you're kind of talking to anyone who will listen, you end up cultivating relationships with people who maybe have 30 minutes once a week to hop on a call, as opposed to people who have like an urgent problem that your technology can solve. I think the startups that do it right spend time with people who will get a lot of value by bringing their technology to their organization. And when we stop working with someone, it's generally because we don't see the relationship maturing. Like we don't see additional layers of commitment, and we don't think that us spending more time with them is going to cause them to reach a decision or cause us to reach an opportunity to make their life better. And so our mission is fundamentally around that.
I'd add to that, and I liked how, and you alluded to this earlier, which is, I want the thing next Monday, and it might be in 3 months. So you're right, you are partners, and you're kind of working on the same vision. But if you've been around for 140 years, and you've worked there for 10 years, and it's just you don't have the same urgency, and I don't think you necessarily have the same milestones and the same time frame. So I hear you that you're kind of we're in it together, but when you're partnering with Citibank, you're really not in it together, because Citibank has been around since whatever it is, 1800. So I think the challenge there is being very honest of what the startup. I mean, most startups are kind of funded for, I call it 18 months, maybe 24 months. So I just think it's really hard with credibility for, it depends on what kind of startups, and maybe you choose not to work with kind of Series A, Series B kind of startups, but you probably there's a selection process there, that if you're really asking for that great of a commitment in terms of mind share, and the progress is not being made, I think from the startup's point of view, you need to figure that out pretty quickly, and agree to commit, or agree and kind of move on. I think that's what I would say.
All right. I think we have time for one more question.
I've got a question, just, and it's going to first go to you, Chris, because it's a story you told me 3 years ago that's always stuck with me.
Oh, yeah.
But what's a really great enterprise, like, sales experience that you've had? And, and what were kind of the dynamics of that? And you always used to talk about Intel Capital CEO Day.
Yeah.
But, like, what are the dynamics of those just, like, awesome experiences where you say, like, this is who I'm going to work with, and you're really excited?
Yeah, so Intel Capital is one of our investors. We actually got Intel as a customer before Intel Capital came in, so we were lucky. But they have a speed dating day, which I think is what you're talking about. So every year, if you've ever been to the Intel Capital conference, they throw a great conference in very warm places with lots of golf, where they basically bring C-level execs from Global 2000 companies, and they bring their portfolio startups. And it is the most brilliantly run, consensus of startups and corporate execs I've ever seen. They literally have about 180 tables set up, and it's speed dating 15 minutes at a time for 8 hours a day for like 3 days straight. And we took great pride that they had leaderboards of who was meeting the most. Like, we were always at the top, literally doing 40, 50 meetings a day. And it's just that if anyone's ever done speed dating, you just know really quickly whether there's an interest, there's a level, like, this is what we do. It's kind of like that pitch. Like, this was the 15-minute, version of our sales pitch that we could just get into someone. And if there's a match, great, let's keep talking. If not, then great, we'll see you next year, and maybe the timing's better. And it just quickly, it's so efficient, so incredibly doing. And I know anyone who doesn't do startup days, you can use them as a model.
Anyone else have a great enterprise story that they'd like to share?
I'd say our 2 best enterprise sales experience were both at events where every decision maker was in the same room, just happened to be there at the event. And so we had a meeting that immediately triggered 4 consecutive meetings over drinks at the event, and we got to a next step before the event was over, including a demo, including all of the parts from the initial meeting through the demo, through an agreement of what success would look like, and then the next step was to see if the stakeholder was enthusiastic about the technology. That's happened twice, and I would strongly, if you have the ability to get decision makers together and get people enthusiastic around something like what Chris was talking about, I think those things are super powerful, because it's always better to start, it's like any process where you have a funnel. You start with a bunch of stuff and things will fall out, but that will be a natural process. And I think if you think about your innovation projects systematically and at scale, it might be easy to be excited about one of the people that you meet with, but if you have 50 meetings, there's only going to be a couple gems in that bunch, and it's a really easy way to prioritize as well and build consensus around prioritization.
I guess the last word is kind of on the other opposite end of that is the API is your best enterprise sales tool. So when you've been able to kind of be adopted by part of the company, something that you've provided real value, it's been kind of pushed up so that the call you get and the kind of pitch that you go into, they've used the product, they understand the value proposition, there are things that they want to do more of. That's a great enterprise sale to me.
Awesome, thank you. I think we're just about out of time. If there's any burning questions, we'll take one, but otherwise, they'll all be around at happy hour.
Did you close those deals?
Yes.
Awesome. If everyone would, in the next few minutes at your leisure, we're going to walk around kind of just past where we had lunch today, and there are some swag bags on the table. Please feel free to grab one. They do have sizes for the t-shirts inside, if you don't want extra large.